All right, Steelers Nation, let's dive into the latest developments surrounding our team, because what has come out recently is not simple, and honestly, it still leaves a lot of people with a lot of questions. The first thing that caught everyone's attention was Dan Rooney giving his first remarks after the hiring of Mike McCarthy, but not in a press conference, not in a public event, and instead through the team's official website. And let's be real, when the head of the organization speaks in a stiff, controlled statement with little depth, it creates the impression that there's something going on behind the scenes. Now, I'm not the type to jump to paranoia, but the way this was handled makes me feel like it could be a move to avoid Rooney being available for tough questions from the media. Not just the media, but also from fans and critics who follow the team closely, like myself. Because when you control the narrative, you avoid confrontation and you avoid having to explain decisions that, for many, seem rushed or made without the full scope of analysis. So, let's get into what was said, because this is where things start to get really interesting. Rooney explained that after bringing in 3 candidates for in-person interviews, Brian Flores, Mike McCarthy, and Anthony Weaver, the organization met and decided that McCarthy was the man for the job. Then they offered him the position on Saturday. This, for many, is the kind of response that does not satisfy, because it leaves a huge question in the air. Why stop the process there when there were still other relevant candidates available? Especially after seeing what happened on Sunday with the Rams, who lost to the Seahawks in the NFC Championship game, which would have made Chris Shula and Nate Scheelhaase fully available for a deeper conversation. The point is, if the goal was truly to choose the best possible coach, it would make sense to go all the way and hear everyone. And most importantly, you cannot say there was no time, because the calendar at that moment was open and the Rams situation showed that those candidates could have been available. So the decision to end the process at that point, even with the possibility of bringing more people in for interviews, feels more like an emotional or political choice than a purely technical one. And there is another detail that bothers me. Bill Cowher confirmed publicly that Dan Rooney, now in the role of running football, was present in all the interviews, both virtual and in person. So if he was involved in everything, why not give him the full run? Why not let him meet all the candidates and understand the different ideas each one brings? In theory, he is the one who should be most involved in this decision, right? If he was there, why cut the process short precisely when the Rams candidates could have been interviewed calmly, without rushing, without the pressure of a tight schedule? Then comes the part that hits the heart of many fans: Aaron Rodgers. Rooney was very clear in saying that the hiring of McCarthy was not based on whether Rodgers would return or not. They said they did not know what the quarterback's plans were, that it did not weigh heavily in the decision, and that the door is open, but everything needs to be analyzed carefully to see if it makes sense. That alone is a mature message, because it finally seems like the franchise is saying the focus is on building a team to win, not just building a system to please a star player. And I honestly agree with that stance. It does not matter what you think of Rodgers, and I completely understand those who believe he should not return because of everything that happened. But the truth is that when you talk about a 42-year-old quarterback with a history of injuries and a season with ups and downs, you cannot base the team's future around him. The era of building a project around a quarterback, that age has to be in the past. Not because Rodgers lacks talent, but because football is a sport where time does not forgive, and the reality is you need to think about the future. And this is where a line came out that I really liked, because it finally feels like the organization admitted something that many have been saying for years: quarterback development needs to be a priority. Rooney even hesitated to say it was the #1 priority, but he made it clear that after choosing the right coach to lead the team to a championship, developing a young quarterback is high on the list. He even said that sooner or later they will work with a young quarterback, and that McCarthy's ability to develop that player is an important factor in the decision. That, to me, is a sign that the franchise understands succession is inevitable and that they need to prepare for it. But then comes the part that creates debate, because Rooney also mentioned that McCarthy said he likes Will Levis, sees great potential in him, and believes Mason Rudolph can contribute. He also said McCarthy seems comfortable with the current quarterback room and the possibilities on the roster. This is a delicate point, because many can interpret this as an attempt to maintain the status quo. And I get the skepticism, because when you're in an interview, you naturally say positive things about what is already there. But at the same time, it is important to hear it, because it shows McCarthy is not arriving with a dismissive attitude. He is showing a willingness to work with what he has and develop what he can. And I cannot ignore the staff issue, because Rooney said McCarthy is trying to build his coaching staff, and that this is not easy, since many of the names he wants are under contract with other teams, meaning permission is needed to speak with them. And, more importantly, he explicitly mentioned being comfortable with discussions about key positions, such as offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and offensive line coach. And then suddenly he drops the offensive line coach, as if it was unexpected, like it was a surprise. And I have to say, that stands out because it means there will likely be change in that area. Because if you remember last season, the offensive line had its ups and downs, but toward the end, except for Brick Jones, Pat Meyer's work was seen as a success, especially in the final weeks. So the possibility of a new offensive line coach suggests McCarthy wants to put his stamp on everything. And that can be good, but it also carries risks, especially if the transition is not handled well. And finally, there was a part one did not expect to see published on the team's official website. Rooney was asked about McCarthy's hiring being unpopular among fans, and he responded quite directly, saying they're not concerned with winning the initial reaction, that the focus is choosing the coach they believe will make the team win, and that social media does not factor into it. He also said, once games begin, none of this will matter because performance on the field will be what counts. The final message was clear. They're excited, believe McCarthy is equipped to lead the team into the next winning phase, and that fans will end up loving Coach Mike. And that is exactly where the main tension lies. Because for many fans, the feeling is that the organization is making choices without caring about the opinion of the base, and that hurts because the fan base is the heart of the team. When you feel unheard, frustration grows. But at the same time, the reality is that in a franchise like the Steelers, the leadership has always made decisions based on its own long-term vision, not based on popular demand. And when we return to the debate about the process, the way this was handled leaves a bitter taste because it seemed like there was a real chance to hit a reset button to bring in a younger, more innovative mindset aligned with what you see across the league today. And when you watch the championship games and see how the league has evolved in a way the Steelers have not kept up with, it is hard not to think the team needs a shakeup. And if the response is, we're just going to repeat what worked in the past, that could be a problem because the game has changed. And I know this may sound harsh, but it is an opinion many share. The Steelers, by holding on to tradition, end up closing themselves off to new ideas. And I'm not saying tradition is bad. Far from it. But tradition without adaptation can become stagnation. And for a team that wants to be a contender again, reinvention is needed without losing the essence, of course. All right, Steelers Nation. So we left off with the big question. What happens next when McCarthy starts assembling his staff and begins to show us the direction he wants to take this franchise? And honestly, that is where the Real story begins, because the coach is not the whole equation. The coach is the face, the leader, the guy who sets the tone, but the staff around him is what really determines whether the team evolves or simply replays the same old script. One of the things that keeps coming back to me is how much the Steelers have historically relied on a certain kind of stability. And stability is not a bad thing, but stability can also become a comfort zone. When a team is comfortable, it stops pushing boundaries. It stops experimenting. It stops challenging itself. And in the modern NFL, if you're not constantly evolving, you are falling behind. The league is moving faster than ever. And the teams that win are the ones that are willing to take risks, adapt, and innovate. That is not the Steelers' way of the past, but it has to be the Steelers' way of the future. Now, the big worry for many fans is that McCarthy will come in and bring a staff made up of familiar faces. Guys he has worked with for years, guys he trusts, guys who think like him. And that could be good, because trust is important, especially in a situation where the pressure is enormous. But it could also be a problem, because if he brings the same kind of thinking, the same kind of approach, the same old playbook, then we're not really changing anything. We're just putting a different name on the door and hoping the results will be different. And let's be real, The Steelers' offense has not been a powerhouse in recent years. The defense has been the backbone of the team, and the offense has struggled to keep up. So if McCarthy comes in with the same old offensive mindset, the same old ideas, and expects the results to change, then we're going to be disappointed. The Steelers need a modern offensive approach. They need a system that fits the players, not a system that forces players to fit into it. And this is where the quarterback situation becomes even more critical. Because if you're going to develop a young quarterback, you have to build the offense around his strengths. You cannot just say, we will make it work. The modern NFL is built around quarterbacks. They are the engine. If you have a quarterback who can throw, run, and make plays, you need to design an offense that lets him thrive. And if you're going to rely on a quarterback like Will Levis, you have to be honest about what he is. He is not a polished veteran. He is a young player with potential, and he needs to be protected, coached, and given the right tools to grow. Now, I know some fans will say Levis is not the answer, and maybe they are right. Maybe he is not the long-term solution. But the point is not whether he is perfect. The point is that the Steelers need to stop pretending they can win with a quarterback they are not fully invested in developing. You cannot keep rotating quarterbacks, hoping one will magically become the answer. You need a plan. You need commitment. You need a quarterback development path that is real, not just talk. And that is where the decision to hire McCarthy becomes interesting. Because McCarthy has a reputation for being able to develop quarterbacks. He has worked with some great ones in the past, and he has shown he can manage a high-profile quarterback situation. But that does not mean he is automatically the right coach for the Steelers. It means he has the potential to be the right coach if he is willing to adapt and if he is willing to build a modern staff around him. One of the biggest concerns is whether McCarthy will be willing to step away from his comfort zone and embrace new ideas. The NFL has changed a lot since his heyday in Green Bay. The game is faster. The offenses are more creative. The defenses are more aggressive. And the way you win today is not the same as the way you won 10 years ago. If McCarthy is going to succeed, he needs to understand that. He needs to be willing to adjust. He needs to be willing to learn. And this is why the coordinators are so important. Because the coordinators are the ones who bring the ideas. They're the ones who design the plays, create the schemes, and adapt to what the league is doing. If McCarthy hires coordinators who are stuck in the past, then the Steelers will be stuck in the past. But if he hires coordinators who are innovative, creative, and willing to push the boundaries, then the Steelers could actually become a modern team again. Now, let's talk about the defensive side because this is where the Steelers have always been strong. The defense has been the identity of the franchise. But even the defense is not immune to change. The league is evolving, and defenses have to evolve with it. The offenses are getting faster, more spread out, and more dynamic. If the defense does not adapt, it will get exposed. And that means the Steelers need a defensive coordinator who understands the modern NFL, not just the old-school mentality. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comment below. Whispers are growing louder around the league, and the kind of silence that usually precedes a seismic move appears to be breaking in Pittsburgh. Sources close to the situation suggest that the Steelers may have already made a franchise-altering decision behind closed doors, one that could reshape the balance of power in the conference. The name circulating through executive suites and agent circles is as bold as it is unexpected: Dak Prescott. According to the rumor, the Steelers front office has quietly positioned itself to land an elite quarterback, believing the roster is closer to contention than public perception suggests. The idea is simple but daring. Pittsburgh has long been defined by defensive identity and stability. Yet insiders hint that ownership is ready to pivot, betting that a proven signal caller could unlock an offense that has shown flashes but lacked consistency and authority under center. Prescott's potential arrival is being framed as more than a routine transaction. Around the league, the belief is that this would be a statement of intent, signaling that the Steelers are done with transitional years and ready to challenge immediately. His leadership, playoff experience, and ability to command a locker room are seen as qualities that align with the franchise's traditional values, even as the move itself would mark a modern, aggressive shift in strategy. What fuels the speculation is the sense that talks, while not public, have reached an advanced stage. Executives are said to be weighing financial gymnastics and roster implications, confident that the long-term payoff would justify the short-term shock. If the leak proves accurate, Pittsburgh fans could soon witness one of the most surprising quarterback chapters in recent memory, a move born not in headlines, but in hushed conversations where the future of the franchise may already be decided. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.